Okay, you guys, I am here for the second part of the Trumpet of the Swan series. This is part 2 of this video series. If you haven't seen the first part, it's going to go into a lot more detail. It's going to kind of tell you my goals with this, to share all the details of the different days. But basically what I'm hoping to do is walk you through a novel and do it your own way, to kind of create your own language arts and to give yourself that freedom to really enjoy the books that you want to enjoy with your family. So I thought I would start this video with kind of a week 1 recap. We started the Trumpet of the Swan, I think last Saturday. And so we are on maybe chapter 6. We are loving it so far. It's very cute, very easy to read. I'm reading about a chapter a day. I think I've only read a chapter a day. So on top of that, we are doing our lessons for the week, which follows a certain pattern, and I explained that in the first video. But the new thing that we added for this unit was the written narration based off of some living books about swans. And I was so pleased with how that turned out. My daughter read a book called Little Swan. It's funny, I have these shelves here, and so I put my swan books here. And multiple times I had to tell her, stop reading that. That's for another week. Because when you display the books, they tend to get interested. So she read Little Swan, which was just a really cute book about trumpeter swans, and then did a written narration. And I think that was a really enjoyable way for me to have her practice writing about what she's reading. So I'm looking forward to doing that again this next week. I wanted to show you what we did for spelling this week. We normally play a game, but we kind of had a really busy schedule. So I just asked her, do you want to play a game or you just want to write the words? Then she ended up doing alternate colors, decorating it. I mean, she kind of just took it to her own thing. So spelling doesn't have to be a game. You could just write the words down. It's totally up to you. If you take a look at our passage study sheet, there's a section for notes where you kind of just like add things that you might have talked about throughout the week. And you might have added your own thing based on what you guys are doing with your conversations. But some of the things that I added was we talked a little bit about personification. In our passage, it said the breath of spring. And spring doesn't really have breath. It's given kind of that human quality, which makes it personification. And then in the passage, there was also a comma. The comma was there because it was a compound sentence. So it had comma and is the conjunction, and it was a compound sentence. So we have practiced that before in our grammar, so it was nice to be able to point it out and say, here it is in this passage, and here's why. So I made a note of that. That's the recap. We just did dictation today, and that went really well. Grammar, we're just doing daily. That's not really, that's based on the grammar curriculum that you've chosen. So I think we're just going to dive into week 2. Week 2 is going to follow the exact same pattern as week 1, which makes this so easy to plan and prepare for. And it really makes for a good routine also. I will show you this in a second, but we're going to follow this daily schedule, and we are going to use the same passage study template sheet. And I actually don't even have to make another copy because this is week 1 up here, and I'm going to put week 2 right down here. So the very first thing we have to do is find a passage that we want to study this week. So I'm on chapter 6. She won't start working on this till Monday. So I'll probably be 2 or 3 chapters ahead by Monday. So I'll probably start like at chapter 8 to find a passage. And I'm going to find it with you guys. I'm going to show you how I do it. And I'm just going to start skimming through a couple chapters. I might look through 8, 9, and 10. Just kind of skimming through until something jumps out at me. And that will be our passage. So we're going to get started with that. So I said start at chapter 8-ish. The thing is, it doesn't have to be exact. If you guys are on way ahead, you could do it another passage ahead. Also, I've just kind of come to the conclusion that like, it's okay if you're not exactly where your passage comes from. It's still going to be meaningful because you're reading the novel. So don't feel bound to a passage in a certain place. That's what's so nice about this. It's flexible. Sometimes I'll look at her grammar book to see what's coming up because maybe I might want to look at something related to that. I just looked at her stuff for next week, and they're teaching a lesson on determining the difference between like a prepositional phrase and something else. So she's going to get some prepositional phrase review. So I will probably make sure and make a note of that so we can point that out in the passage that we choose. All right, so we're going to start skimming, and I will let you know what I find. I think I found one. I think this paints a good picture for what's about to happen. It's a little bit long, but I think I'm just gonna go with it.
You can imagine the noise in the music store when the cob crashed through the window. At the moment the glass broke, one of the clerks was showing a bass drum to a customer, and the clerk was so startled at seeing a big white bird come flying through the window, he hit the drum a tremendous wallop.
So this might just be a line or two longer than we normally do. So why did I choose this? Number one, I feel like it's going to show us what's about to happen. We know that there's going to be some disturbance in the music store. We read previously in the story that the cob, the dad, Swan, was going to think about getting a trumpet. And so this is kind of telling us, okay, this might be happening. Second, I feel like there's some good words in here to talk about. A clerk, startled, tremendous, and wallop, I think are really fun words to talk about. There are a lot of commas in here, and I'm pretty sure I can state why they are. I have to be careful to make sure that I know what I'm explaining when I pick it. And if I don't, I just don't pick that passage. Okay, so I think this one will be fun. I think it creates a good picture of what's coming. So let's write it in our template, and then we'll pick out the spelling words and some of the vocabulary words.
Here's where we are. Our passage is going to start here, and it's actually this whole paragraph. So like I said, a little bit longer than what I normally do, but I'm just going to go ahead and challenge her. So I'm going to start writing this right here. This is week 2 of our study, so I'll just write that there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy this passage. As I write all this, I sometimes think to myself, it would be nice if this was something that you could just type into, but I tend to like writing. That's just my personality. You could definitely just create something similar and type it. Okay, we've got our passage in. So the next thing we're going to do is choose our spelling words from here. So I'm just going to go through and pick the words that I think would be a good fit for her. So you might not choose the same words that I choose for your child, but I'm going to choose the ones I think that would be a good challenge for her. So I'm going to start with imagine, noise. I'm going to do crashed. Let's do through, because you can spell that 2 different ways. Clerks. Bass. We're going to do bass because that might be tricky. Customer. So, oh, I spelled it wrong. Startled. Tremendous, and wallop. All right, so we chose our words. We've got 10 this week. Vocabulary, we're going to do clerk. I'm going to put on their bass drum because I want her to picture it in her head so she can picture this whole scene. Let's see, I'm going to make sure she knows what a customer is. I feel like that might be obvious, but sometimes we just want to make sure. I got clerk. I'm going to put startled on there. And I'm going to put tremendous and wallop. Okay, so this is filled out for the week. This one I leave blank. I add to it as we do our lesson throughout the week. So here you can see those notes I mentioned earlier from last week. If we cover something here, I will write that down. Maybe actually, you know what? I might just put myself a little reminder. Look for prepositional phrases since that's coming up in her grammar. So this is kind of just a note for me. Okay, so this is finished. Now we're going to talk about what we're going to do this week.
Okay, now that we've got our passage picked out, you're going to want to decide how you want to do our copy work. Now, this is going to be the point where if you have not watched my first video in this series, you're going to want to go back and watch it because I'm going to give you tons of tips on copy work ideas. I'm going to give you details about each lesson, and I really think it's going to be helpful. In this video, I was hoping to make it shorter so we could just kind of get to the main points because we're going to be following the same patterns. So decide how you want to set up your copy work. My daughter just ends up copying it from the book, and then I have a copy in my passage study template. So there's really no prep for me, but if you were doing some type of printout where you wanted to copy it or put some lined paper on it, then that is something that you will want to prepare for the week. This is the schedule that we're following. This is the same exact schedule that we did for the first week, and this is the schedule we will continue to follow for this novel. So day 1, we're going to be following our normal pattern, but we're going to focus on vocabulary and spelling. When we do the passage review, this is also when I'll point out punctuation. You know, why is it there, that sort of thing. Anything I want to talk with her about in this passage, that's going to be on day 1. Okay, day 2. This is where we do our written narration, and this is where our other books come in. Now, you could find any book that you wanted about a swan if you wanted to. You could read it to them. This is something that I want my daughter to do on her own. I want her to read the book on her own and then write about it so I can kind of see how she's taking it in. She chose the next book. She wants to read The Wild Swan. This has been intriguing her all week long. This is the one that she's gonna read this week. Now, I mentioned this in the first video. This is by Hans Christian Andersen. It's kind of an old fairy tale. Definitely, if this is something that you want to give your kiddo, you might just wanna skim through it first, make sure that you're okay with it, make sure that it's appropriate for what you want in your home. I wanna make sure that you're happy with this choice. If you don't want this book, you can pick one of the other books that I mentioned in the first video. I think there's an ugly duckling story as well. Okay, so on Tuesday, she will read this and then write about it. Okay, so we move on to day 3. Day 3 is kind of our catch-up day. This is usually the day where I look at punctuation because I usually forget it on the first day. I'll be like, oh yeah, we need to look at punctuation because dictation is the next day. So I want to prepare her for success. And then the last day is dictation. So if you have any questions about that kind of scheduling, be sure go back and watch that first video and I will break it down step by step. But that's it. That's it for planning week 2. We've got our new passage ready to go. We've got our story chosen. Now we will just follow our schedule and we will aim to read a chapter a day. We're coming up on the weekend. There's probably going to be a day or two where I might not read a chapter. That's okay. That's what's great about doing this is we are not on a schedule. So read the book at your pace. Make sure that you're doing it in a joyful way for your home. And then I'll be back next week to kind of give you an idea of where we're at and where we go next.